Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Lighter Living YouTube channel and a Q&A that is much overdue. And I'm sorry I had a winter away and took some time, which was fabulous. So today's live chat is also interactive. So I want you to ask many questions, and it won't be a super long conversation. However, over the winter, I had many conversations with Bastian, particularly around why Joseph Pilates called his program Contrology and not Stretchology or Strengthology, because clearly the form of Pilates engages the entire body in a really all-encompassing way, where you obviously become more supple. You also can become stronger. But why was it Contrology? And he believed very much that it was a coordination of the mind, the body, and the soul. So when he was a very sick little boy or man, he learned that the mind controlled everything. So as we do our practice on the reformer, it's very easy to think about it as simply resistance training. And the tendency is for people to keep adding resistance so that you build more muscle strength. However, if you've done my classes over the last couple of years, you will have learned that we change the resistance regularly so that we become more focused on the internal stabilizing muscles that allow us to have total control over the movement. So, for example, if I'm doing the warm-up footwork series, and I'm just going to do it with you, and I've got 2 black, which is light resistance, and I start to make the movement, what I notice immediately is that my legs don't have to work very hard because there's not a lot of resistance. But instantly, there's a tendency for a wobble to occur. So what do we say? We always say, focus on the pelvis, keep it really still in a neutral spine by engaging the abdominal muscles. And I always suggest also that we squeeze the inner thighs together to give us the control. So as you're working, when you close your eyes and you pay attention to what the body is doing, which muscles initiate the movement, you'll find that if you're doing it correctly, you exhale, you pull your belly button down towards your spine, and you make the movement. There can still be a slight wobble because the inner thighs are not engaged. So when you squeeze the knees together, that takes care of that. And all of a sudden, you have this amazingly controlled movement where all the right muscles are initiating. And then if we wanted to add strength later, we would just add a resistance band so that now you absolutely have less need for control inside, and the major muscles of the legs begin to do more work. So again, it's true of almost every single exercise that adding more resistance doesn't necessarily make the exercise more effective, which is why throughout all of the classes that I do, we tend to change the resistance up so that you, in your own personal practice, can close your eyes and begin to become aware of which muscles are actually doing the job. So coming back to my notes, because I really kind of just want to philosophize a little bit about it. When Joe Pilates created the program originally, he thought of it as a combination of yoga, martial arts, boxing, gymnastics, Tai Chi, and meditation, believe it or not, because he really did believe that the mind being engaged in your movement pattern is seriously important. So in the same way that you can shake someone's hand and you can just flop, you can also really grasp a person's hand and shake, and it's a completely different handshake. The same is true when you get on your reformer and you make the exercises. So I wanted to challenge you a little bit over the next few weeks to begin to increase your body awareness by really closing your eyes in a meditative state as you're working out, and feel the difference between which muscles are stable, which ones are symmetrical, which ones are initiating, and which ones come into play after you begin the initiation of the movement. And very quickly, you begin to understand how important total control and precision is in the exercise. I can give you another quick example of, say, the bicep curl. So on very light chords, I can be sitting facing the back of the room, and I can lean back. And on light chords, my core has to really engage. On heavier chords, that's not as much the case. So here, as I begin to bicep curl, my biceps are not doing an enormous amount of work because my tension is light. If I added more resistance, then obviously, if it's too much, I'm going to wobble, so then I don't have control. If it's too light, my body has no control over, unless I have really strong core muscles. So there's, for every single person, a subjective level of resistance where you feel the most amount of control over the movement from head to toe. So I hope that makes some sense. You know, resistance is something that we've been trained to think more resistance is better. But actually in AEROPILATES, that's not the case. And so begin to think of your practices as more of an internal eye. Begin to feel each muscle working. And don't just assume that when I say heavy chords, that heavy chords is necessarily the right thing. It might be for the purpose of that particular exercise if I'm working mobilizers. But if I really want to get true awareness and control of my body, it's all about the stabilizing muscles. So I hope that's been a little more insightful. I'd love to hear some of your comments. Thank you, Connie. Hi. Hi to everybody that's here. Bastian and I have these conversations all the time because I think as I continue, it's almost 30 years now of doing Pilates. I discover things every single day about the practice. The breathing is another thing that he believed was an important part of controlling the movement. So in my particular exercise routines, I will often say, use your breath. So for example, if I was doing an exercise that, well, let's say we do leg circles. So I'm going to add resistance because using the breath is required more when you have exertion. So what we do is we exhale on the exertion. So let's just take a leg circle. As I lift, the reform is helping me. I'm stabilizing. I'm using my core. As I come to the top and come around, here is where I need to exhale to use the breath to improve the exercise on the exertion. So more resistance, use your breath more. In light chords, you're going to use your breath the opposite way. It's all in the stabilization. So again, I hope it's not confusing. The idea is that in every exercise, depending on what resistance you have, you need to use your breath where it's hardest. So here, it's really hard here because I have to stabilize because the reform is not helping me. So I might exhale right there. That is true in the standing lead work. More resistance, exhale on the way out. Less resistance, exhale on the way in. So again, the breath is really important for the controlling of each of the exercises as well. Connie is saying that it's great advice for a 66-year-old. You know, I turned 68 this year, as you know, and And something that I've become very aware of is that wear and tear and overuse of bones and joints and muscles is actually a real thing. I see it in my dad, who just had his 99th birthday. So that's an absolute extreme where he can actually experience spontaneous fractures because his bones are old. So as we exercise into our older age, it's really important to do it very mindfully and carefully, using our breath, figuring out the exact right amount of resistance. More is not better, etc. And it's such an amazing system for aging because we are stretching and strengthening and improving our movement process at the same time. If we talk a little bit about stretching, you may go to a massage therapist or a chiropractor, and often something is out of balance and they'll say, stretch it. But sometimes stretching isn't exactly what's required. When a muscle is really tight and it's resistantly tight, it's holding something in place. So stretching it is not what you need to do to heal the issue. So these are all things that you will become aware of the more you do your AEROPILATES routines every day, the more you pay attention to what you're doing, mindfully exercising, and really focusing on which muscles are working and how it feels when you're actually making the movement. Don't forget that on Lighter Living, we have our subscription. Share it with other people. If you want to be able to stream it on your computer, etc., then the YouTube channel is a better way for that. I've added a lot of new classes in both video programs over the winter. I tend to do them in hour-long sequences, just so that we can really do a full progression, which in AEROPILATES is very obvious. We begin always lying on our back, doing the warm-up footwork. And right there, it's important because we're teaching our pelvis to stay stable in as much of a neutral spine as you possibly can manage while you're moving your lower body. Then we go into the abdominal sequence of building up to the 100, and that's all about really focusing through the abdominal muscles, which are our key stabilizers that can connect our upper and our lower body together. So we want them to have a connection. We want them to be talking to each other. Then we do a lying arm series, which I really love because when you're lying on your back in the prone position, you have a different amount of strength for your arms than when you begin to sit or kneel. After the lying arms, we go into the sitting arms. And if we're doing an advanced work, we might do a kneeling set of arm work, which is harder, but it's harder because more core has to be engaged, which then takes the emphasis away from the arms and into the stabilization of the core. So change it up as you work through your week. Some days I'll still go back to sitting Indian style doing my arms because it's a very different exercise. I can really work the mobilizing muscles of the arms and add resistance when I'm sitting like that. As soon as I'm kneeling, that changes the entire focus of the exercise. Connie's mentioning that she's recovering from an ACL replacement. And remember that Joe Pilates thought of reformer Pilates as physiotherapy. He really believed it was rehabilitative because you can, without the weight of your body holding you up, you can begin to engage and strengthen all the little tiny muscles that you can't access when you're in the standing position, but you can get to in the lying down position. And so healing knees and hips and shoulders was his specialty. And of course, he did it with all his dancers, and a good physical therapy studio should have a good understanding of reformer Pilates as a way to heal. The other things that I think Contrology was so beneficial for, and you begin to see after a period of time of doing a regular practice, is that your not only does your posture improve because we can fix the imbalances, the tightness and weakness areas of our body. For example, if I have a very tight rib cage on the right, that's going to pull my ribs in this direction, which makes this side of the rib cage stretched, overstretched, and tired. So what I want to do, and then I end up with a scoliosis, which then causes problems in the hips, problems in the shoulders. So what I want to do is lengthen through the intercostal muscles of the ribs on this side and strengthen the muscles on the other side. And quickly then you begin to see improvement in that posture, improvement in the ability to breathe, improvement in how your hips are aligned. I mean, it changes everything. So a tiny little imbalance somewhere in the body will affect various other parts of the body too. Obviously, flexibility is important, but as I said earlier, what's most important when you're doing a stretch is to make sure. So we end up doing the stretching at the end of our hour. So after the arms, we'll do the legs. Then we go into a stretching series, which for me includes the most important exercises of all. The 100 is abdominals in the beginning. Everybody says the 100's the most important, but it's not. The elephant. Tight hamstrings will really affect your pelvis, will pull everything out of alignment, affect your lower back affect your neck. So having hamstrings that are evenly long on both sides through the lower back, lengthening as well, really changes everything about how you stand and move as you age. The mermaid, which I just did an example of tightness through the rib cage. Not only does that restrict your breathing, but it can really hurt your back. So having nice length through the side of your body in a very stable, balanced, symmetrical way is really important. So the mermaid is, I think, a very important stretch, not one that we tend to think about at the gym. You know, how often do people side bend at the gym? They really forget about side bending, but it's an important lateral movement of our spine. And then we do Eve's lunge, which is key for the hips, opening up the hips, lengthening through the hip flexors, because we spend so much time sitting. You know, so from here you can actually, if you stay very far forward and just lower the hips to the floor, the platform naturally goes back, opening up the hip flexor. If you're here and you just look up, you can stretch all the way from your neck through to your pubic bone. And then, of course, you can also address the hamstring of the standing leg to get through. And when you're in this position, it's not just the hamstring, it's through the calf muscle, into the Achilles, all the way down through into the extension of your lower back as well. But what's important is when you go to the other side, you want to try to make it symmetrical. You're not trying to overstretch one side more than the other. And so as you do your stretches, again, you close your eyes and you say, oh, I'm much tighter on this side than that. So you work on that tighter side to try to make it even. You do not do the opposite, which is to keep stretching the flexible side and leave the tighter side tighter. And then finally, we finish with the piriformis. And I'm just going to show you a bunch of ways to do piriformis stretch. You can do it lying down. Right here, you can just straighten your leg and put your ankle on your knee, and then very gently just start to bend the knee. And as you bend, the piriformis on this side is beginning to lengthen. If you're really more flexible than that, you can lift the leg off and begin to pull it towards your head as you gently encourage this knee to go back. And then the way that I like to do it the most is sitting. So sitting sideways with my feet under my knees, ankle on the knee. You can do this in a chair too. And I'm sitting evenly on both sit bones, reaching forward over the knee. And immediately I can feel that piriformis lengthening. If I gently push the knee down and away, I get more of a stretch in the attachment in the leg. And if I pull the knee towards me, I get more of a stretch in the attachment on the spine. So you can gently figure that out. Then if I come back into this erect position and rotate over the knee, that's a slightly different stretch. All the while controlling, coming back to Contrology, controlling everything. You don't let your hips sag. You stay alert in every part of your body, stabilizing the pelvis and working through those muscles. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else we need to talk about? I think creating a mind-body connection in everything you do changes your whole life. And I think that that is really important. So we're mentioning here some articles on Lighter Living. There's a link there for the article on resistance, which is something that I can't talk about enough. We talked about it in this, again, more resistance is not always better. Less is more challenging in so many deep core stabilizing control ways. So if you want to work on the control of how you move, then reduce the resistance. Oh, Maria's been re-inspired to get back on her reformer. That's important. You know, I know finding the time every day to do something that feels like it's exercise can be challenging. However, if you think about this as mind, body, spirit, control, connection, you know, it's so healthy. It's so healthy for your attitude in life, your confidence, and of course, it's going to change how your body moves and feels, which I think is everything. If you're not feeling good, you know, I keep thinking about age. You know, age is great, but if your body's falling apart, it's not fun. So we want to age gracefully, and you know, please God help us stay as strong and healthy as we can in our mind, body, and our spirit. So I think that when I begin with a new client, you know, I look at them. I first just take a look at their body standing facing me. And what I'm looking for is shoulders that are tipped, a neck that goes off to the side, maybe a hip that is slightly off, the way in which their arms hang, meaning if they're, you know, if their thumbs are facing forward as their arms, I'm going to stand up and show you. If their arms are facing this way, then I know that their shoulders are back and down. If the hands are facing this way, then I know the shoulders are rounded. And if they're too much this way, then I know they've got too much extension in their back. So I can see immediately before someone even begins working with me, what's going on in the patterns of their, you know, their movement. The next thing that I look for is their suppleness level. So can they touch their toes? Can they rotate their body? Can they rotate their head? You know, can you feel freedom as you move your spine? Then obviously, you know, we kind of want to get a sense of stamina and endurance in terms of, you know, can you do a full 20-minute workout, or could you actually do an hour? How stable is the person in terms of their balance? Because, you know, that's important. And then lastly, you get a sense very quickly once they're on the reformer of how connected they are in their body. How do they feel? You know, what do they feel? So once I get all that down, I can then customize a workout for them to improve their strength, improve their flexibility, improve their balance, improve their posture, and quickly they become more and more aware of their own body. Some of the principles of Pilates that I like to incorporate came from Joe Pilates. So the first one he always talks about is progression. And progression means, in the dictionary, it means making something move forward. But in Pilates, what he means is we begin slowly. We start out with the body the way it is. As we increase core strength, we can progress to the next level of challenge of the core. For example, you're sitting Indian style doing your arms. You go to legs straight out in front. So we start here. The levers are very short. You're really close to the reformer, so it's holding you. You begin to, you make your movement here. So my core is working because I'm moving in space, but it's not as challenged as if the lever was longer. So now as soon as I increase the levers, now my legs are out. Now I have to work a little bit harder on stabilizing this part of my body because it's further out. So now I'm working a little bit harder. Sometimes I have to reduce the resistance because the core work becomes more of a focus. And that is absolutely true when I go into the kneeling advanced arm work, which requires taking off resistance. I like to create a triangle. So my knees are under my shoulders, but my feet are together at the back. So that gives me a nice triangular level of security at the bottom, a stable, foundation. And now here, my arms don't work quite as hard, but my core is really holding me in place. So there's a perfect example of progression where we go from what our bodies can do in the beginning to improving the core strength and then progressing through into a more advanced exercise. So modifications obviously are always important. And as I work with people, I'm modifying constantly. For example, and that is one of his principles of Contrology too. Let me see if I have, I'm going to take this. So for example, if someone is sitting, they've done their Indian style, they want to progress to the legs straight out, but they're leaning back because their hamstrings are tight. And so suddenly they're doing a few of these and, oh, my back really hurts because you're straining your back. So if you can't sit evenly on both sit bones, almost leaning forward slightly, it means your hamstrings are tight. So a modification for that is you take a little box or a rolled up towel or, a yoga mat like I have here. And now I'm sitting on it and you can see all of a sudden the pressure is off the hamstring length and suddenly the person can sit tall and make the exercise with control and mindfulness in the way that they're supposed to. Let me take a look and see if there are any questions. Marjolein is asking, how do we approach chronic fatigue training? It's so hard to gauge. Okay, so I think that with any of the illnesses or chronic conditions that really stress your stamina and fatigue and endurance levels, it's really important to go slowly. And I would always stick with middle chords. Don't go too light, don't go too heavy in the beginning, and just really build the strength in the body from that middle range. On days when you feel really good, you can actually, just either go down or up a little bit to see how you manage that, but never overdo it. It's so important to really be gentle. And you're right, it is hard to gauge because it's not just dependent on what you ate the day before or how much movement you've made, or so many things play a factor. It can be environmental exposure, it can be how much sleep you had the night before, etc. So I think that learning to listen to your own body and not imagining, just because I say do 20 repetitions of something like, bicep curl, You can only do 3, do 3. You know, you have to become your own best advocate. Daria, hi. Trying to do short session every day. I believe it's better for my body. Do you agree? When I have more time, I do a full session following a class. I think 5 minutes is fabulous. You know, 5 minutes of a few stretches before you go to sleep. Maybe 3 minutes of the warm-up footwork series, you know, to get your lower body and your feet and your mobilizers and some oxygen flowing. Any amount of time is better than nothing at all. We have seen, so we started the conversation in the beginning about Joe Pilates and Contrology, and as you all know, I was classically trained. So I was trained by Romana and Sean Gallagher and the New York team that were trained under Joe Pilates. So I learned Pilates the way Joe Pilates taught it. But over the years, as we've become more and more aware of the anatomy of movement, physiology has changed. There have been some dramatic changes in how we teach. For example, when Joe Pilates was teaching, he used to believe that you had to imprint your spine. So what that means is I'm lying down, I'm making my warm-up footwork, and my lower back is connected to the platform. That means for me that there's a slight pelvic tilt because my natural spine has a slight curve, and most people should have a slight bit of extension in your lower spine. So the way we teach it now is to have a little bit of a gap in that lumbar curve while you're making movements. So imprinting is no longer something that that most of us teach. We tend to teach neutral spine because what we're really trying to do in that lying down position is simulate the body in the standing position. So if you can imagine, the foot bar really acts like the floor when you're making all those squats in the warm-up footwork. The rebounder also, you know, becomes like the floor when you're jumping. But lying prone, obviously, it changes the amount of impact. We have many people ask us about whether bungees or springs are better, and honestly, I love the bungees. It's a very personal preference because, as you know, the original reformers were all spring reformers. We made our home reformer a bungee reformer because we were worried about people injuring themselves with springs. You know, you can get your hair caught, your fingers caught, etc. So with bungees, we felt it was safer. But what happens with a bungee is as it stretches, it has a very even stretch from start to finish. With a spring, that's not the case. So with a spring, you'll feel this immediate release, and then it gets tighter. So it has a slightly different tension throughout the movement of the exercise. Some people really love that feeling. I don't think it makes any difference to how it affects the body, whether you use springs or bungees. But I prefer the feeling of the evenness of a bungee cord stretch. I've had many spring reformers. In fact, I just sold all of them this winter. I'm left with my bungee cord ones. I'm bringing in some because I have to do some HSN shows later in June, actually June 11th. And I'll do them from the studio here. So I needed some space. But over time, I just felt that our little AEROPILATES reformers are just so user-friendly and so comfortable to work out on. And remember, just coming back to the need to control versus always paying attention to strength, I think what's important is that it doesn't have to be difficult to be effective. You know, you can get lots of result from very small amount of commitment, and finding the things that unlock your body. For example, if I don't do the piriformis stretch every day, I know that I can have some SI joint issues from my accident. So if I can't do everything in a day because I don't have time, I try to stretch my hamstrings, stretch my piriformis, and do a hip flexor stretch. I think these are just important things to sort of unlock the freedom in your body if you can't do all the other things. So I'm going to wrap it up. I feel like I talk too much. I've got one more question here from Daria. No, we've answered that for you. I'm going to wrap it up. I want to remind you to subscribe for free to the YouTube channel. I keep adding videos to that all the time. If you want access to the full library, obviously you can do the paid subscription. Lighter Living website also, you know, has the same video library. There it's slightly differently organized, so you can actually customize your workout based on the focus that you want to have for the day, which isn't possible in the paid membership on YouTube. But that's organized in a different way, thanks to our gorgeous Bastian, who does that constantly. His commitment to AEROPILATES is beyond sensational, and I'm always so grateful for that. So let me know how I can help. Get on your reformers every day, just a little bit, and I promise I'll do more of these. I'll try to do one next month as well as the summer goes by. I'm back in the United States, so I feel very fortunate to be here. It's a rainy spring out there today, but I love being back. So thanks to everybody, and I'll see you next time.